In the deepest chambers of sleep, where ordinary consciousness dissolves like mist before the morning sun, Edgar Cayce's awareness descended into realms that exist before memory, before history, before the first breath of creation stirred the cosmic waters. Here, in this twilight sanctuary between being and becoming, the sleeping prophet's inner eye opened upon the most profound mystery of existence itself, the moment when souls first emerged from the infinite darkness of divine potential into the dancing light of individuated being. This was not the genesis of biology textbooks, with their mechanical explanations of chance and chemical accident. No, this was the true cosmogony, the sacred birth of consciousness itself from the womb of the Absolute. In Cayce's mystical vision, we witness the primordial stirring of awareness as it first recognizes itself as separate from its source. Like a wave becoming momentarily distinct from the ocean while never ceasing to be water itself, the sleeping prophet's consciousness, freed from the constraining logic of waking thought, touched something older than time, the eternal moment when the one first dreamed of becoming many. In this archetypal memory, souls did not evolve from matter but emanated from spirit, each one a unique facet of divine consciousness, exploring its own infinite nature through the prism of individual experience. These were not crude religious fantasies, but profound psychological truths encoded in mythic language. Jung himself understood that such visions speak to the deepest structures of the psyche, revealing how consciousness itself emerges from the collective unconscious like stars. Being born from the cosmic darkness, the soul's journey into material existence becomes, in Cayce's revelation, the greatest love story ever conceived. Not the fall from grace that theology describes, but the divine romance between spirit and matter, between the eternal and the temporal, between the formless awareness and its infinite capacity for creative self-expression. In this primordial moment that exists outside of sequential time, consciousness discovers its fundamental paradox. It must become many to know itself, as one must experience separation to appreciate unity, must taste the illusion of individuality to fully comprehend its essential wholeness. The sleeping prophet's vision reveals that what we call creation is actually divine play, the cosmic game of hide and seek where God forgets itself into multiplicity for the sheer joy of remembering itself anew through countless unique perspectives. This is the secret that mystics throughout the ages have glimpsed in their deepest contemplations. We are not fallen beings seeking redemption, but divine sparks temporarily forgetting our luminous nature for the adventure of rediscovering it. Each soul carries within its depths this primordial memory, this cellular knowing of its cosmic origin. Though the veils of material existence may obscure this truth, the sleeping prophet's gift was to pierce through these layers of forgetting and reveal the eternal reality that pulses beneath the surface of ordinary awareness. The truth that we are, each and all, thoughts in the mind of God, learning to think ourselves back home. Before the great forgetting, before consciousness clothed itself in the dense garments of flesh and bone, there existed a realm of such pristine unity that the very concept of separation was unknown. A paradisiacal state where souls dwelt in perfect harmony with their divine source, like children who have never known the pain of leaving their mother's embrace. In this archetypal Eden that Cayce's mystical sight revealed, duality had not yet fractured the seamless wholeness of being. Here, in this garden of primordial consciousness, souls existed neither as male nor female, neither as self nor other, but as pure awareness dancing in the infinite ocean of divine being. They were like rays of sunlight that knew themselves simultaneously as individual beams and as the unified radiance from which they emerged. This was not a place but a state of consciousness, the eternal home that exists not in some distant, past but in the depths of every soul's deepest nature, waiting patiently to be remembered and reclaimed. The sleeping prophet's vision penetrated beyond the linear narratives of Scripture to reveal this paradisiacal condition as psychological reality rather than historical event. In Jung's language, this was the state of unconscious wholeness that precedes the ego's birth. That blessed condition where the individual psyche rests undifferentiated within the collective unconscious, like an unborn child floating in the warm darkness of the cosmic womb. In this realm of original blessing, consciousness experienced the supreme joy of creative expression without the anguish of perceived separation from its ground. Souls were like master musicians in a divine orchestra, each contributing their unique note to the cosmic symphony while remaining perfectly attuned to the conductor's unifying vision. They knew themselves as both the individual instruments and the music itself, distinct melodies within the greater harmony that gave them meaning and purpose. This was the consciousness that mystics throughout history have glimpsed in their deepest meditations, the recognition that at the core of individual awareness lies the same infinite presence that illuminates all existence. In this state, love was not something souls possessed or shared, but the very fabric of their being, the gravitational force that held the entire cosmos in perfect balance and harmony. Yet even in this blissful unity, the seeds of the great adventure were already stirring. For consciousness, by its very nature, seeks to know itself through experience, to explore the infinite possibilities hidden within its own depths. The souls in this paradisiacal realm were like actors backstage before the cosmic drama begins, still remembering their true identity while preparing to lose themselves completely in the roles they were about to play. Cayce, quote, "S revelation shows us that this garden state was never truly lost. It exists eternally in the depths of consciousness itself, accessible to any soul courageous enough to journey beyond the ego's defensive walls. Every moment of genuine love, every flash of mystical insight, every experience of profound peace is actually a temporary homecoming to this primordial unity that remains our truest nature beneath all the costumes of personality and the makeup of individual identity that we have learned to wear so convincingly in the theater of material existence." The Great Descent began not with sin, but with curiosity. That divine restlessness that stirs in consciousness like spring stirring in winter's depths. Like cosmic children drawn to explore beyond the familiar boundaries of home, souls felt the magnetic pull of the unknown, the irresistible invitation to discover what lay beyond the garden of pure unity. This was not rebellion against the divine order, but the fulfillment of it. For how could infinite consciousness know the full extent of its creative power without testing the limits of its own expression? In Cayce's mystical archaeology of the soul, we witness consciousness beginning its fateful romance with form, tentatively at first, like a swimmer testing the temperature of unknown waters. These early souls were not yet trapped by matter, but dancing with it, experimenting with the thrilling sensation of boundaries, of edges, of the delicious contrast between inside and outside that unity had never permitted them to experience. The sleeping prophet's vision reveals this descent as sacred play that gradually became sacred entanglement. Consciousness, intoxicated by the novelty of limitation, began clothing itself in increasingly dense garments of manifestation. First came the subtle bodies of light and energy, gossamer forms that retained their connection to the formless source. Then came the gravitational pull toward denser expressions, the irresistible allure of matter's promise to provide more vivid, more intense, more dramatically contrasted experiences of existence. Jung understood this archetypal pattern in his concept of enantiodromia, how consciousness, when pushed to any extreme, inevitably swings toward its opposite. The soul's perfection in unity created its own hunger for the imperfection of multiplicity. Their eternal knowledge of themselves as spirit generated a longing to know themselves as seemingly separate forms, to taste the bittersweet wine of individuality that could never be experienced from within the undifferentiated wholeness of their origin. This was not fall, but exploration, not punishment, but adventure. Matter became consciousness's laboratory, the cosmic stage where spirit could perform the grand experiment of pretending to be something other than itself. Each descent into denser form was like an actor putting on a more elaborate costume. Each incarnation a deeper method-acting performance in the greatest drama ever conceived. The play of the one pretending to be many. Yet as souls became more deeply absorbed in their material roles, something profound occurred. The costumes began to feel real. The theatrical makeup started to seem like actual skin. The stage properties took on the weight of solid reality. Consciousness, the eternal witness, began to identify so completely with its temporary costumes that it forgot the dressing room where its true face waited patiently to be remembered. The sleeping prophet saw that this forgetting was not cosmic accident, but divine necessity. For matter was never meant to be prison, but professor, teaching consciousness about its own infinite plasticity through the curriculum of limitation. Every boundary that souls encountered became a mirror reflecting back their own creative power. Every challenge in the material realm became an opportunity to discover hidden capabilities that could never have been revealed in the seamless perfection of their original unity. This is why mystics speak of matter with such paradoxical reverence, not as the enemy of spirit, but as its most devoted teacher, offering consciousness the priceless gift of contrast through which it could finally comprehend the magnitude of its own luminous nature. In the veiled memory halls of prehistory, where time bends back upon itself like a serpent swallowing its own tail, Cayce's inner eye beheld the shimmering towers of Atlantis rising from primordial mists, not merely as sunken continent lost to oceanic depths, but as archetypal symbol of consciousness's first grand experiment with mastery over the physical realm. Here was humanity's adolescence in material form, that intoxicating period when souls first discovered their godlike powers while still wearing the costumes of mortal flesh. The sleeping prophet's vision penetrated beyond the romantic legends of lost civilizations to reveal Atlantis as a psychological reality, the developmental stage where consciousness, having forgotten its purely spiritual nature, begins to remember its creative potency through technological and psychic mastery. These ancient souls had learned to bend matter to their will as easily as a musician bends notes to melody, manipulating the very fabric of physical reality through focused intention harmonized with cosmic law. In this archetypal civilization, healing was accomplished not through crude chemical intervention, but through the precise application of vibrational frequencies that restored the body's natural harmonic patterns. Crystals became more than mere stones. They were living interfaces between consciousness and matter, amplifying the soul's inherent capacity to restructure reality at the quantum level. Transportation transcended mechanical limitation as consciousness learned to project itself across vast distances, traveling through dimensions with the fluid ease of thought itself. Yet within this very mastery lay the seeds of the great forgetting that would plague human consciousness for millennia to come. The Atlantean souls, drunk on their rediscovered powers, began to mistake the instrument for the musician, the technology for the consciousness that wielded it. They forgot that their abilities were expressions of their divine nature, and instead began to see themselves as separate beings who happened to possess extraordinary capabilities. Jung would recognize in this Atlantean pattern the shadow of human achievement, how the ego, confronted with genuine spiritual power, inevitably seeks to claim ownership of what can only be channeled through surrender to something greater than itself. The crystal temples that once served as sanctuaries for communion with cosmic intelligence gradually transformed into monuments to human pride. their sacred technologies corrupted by the collective shadow of a civilization that confused spiritual gifts with personal possessions. This is the eternal Atlantean temptation that every advancing soul must navigate. The seductive belief that awakening spiritual abilities makes one special rather than simply more transparent to the divine energies that flow through all existence. The sleeping prophet saw how this prideful identification with power rather than surrender to its source created the psychic conditions that would eventually sink not just a continent but human consciousness itself into the dark waters of materialistic forgetting. The destruction of Atlantis, in Cayce's mystical cartography, was not divine punishment, but natural consequence, the inevitable collapse that occurs when consciousness, intoxicated by its own creative abilities, loses connection with the humble receptivity that allows divine power to flow through it without obstruction. The great cataclysm became both ending and beginning, simultaneously destroying the infrastructure of spiritual arrogance while scattering awakened souls across the globe to plant seeds of wisdom in cultures that would nurture them with greater reverence and restraint. This Atlantean echo continues to reverberate through every age, manifesting whenever human civilization rediscovers powerful technologies without the corresponding wisdom to wield them consciously. As consciousness descended deeper into matter's honeyed trap, a merciful veil began to descend like twilight, fog over the soul's divine memory. The great forgetting that Jung recognized as the necessary prelude to individuation, the psychological equivalent of birth trauma that allows infinite awareness to contract into the manageable boundaries of personal identity. This amnesia was not cosmic cruelty but divine compassion. For how could finite forms contain the blazing truth of their infinite nature without shattering like delicate vessels exposed to lightning? The sleeping prophet's vision reveals this, forgetting as the ultimate act of cosmic love. Consciousness voluntarily limiting its own awareness so completely that it could authentically experience the adventure of rediscovering its divine nature through the labyrinthine journey of material existence. Like an actor so thoroughly immersed in character that even backstage they remain in role, souls became method actors in the cosmic drama, forgetting not only their lines, but their very identity as performers in the divine theater. Each incarnation deepened this sacred amnesia, layer upon layer of material identification, obscuring the luminous core of being like sediment accumulating at the bottom of a once clear lake. The soul's original knowing of itself as pure awareness became buried beneath accumulated memories of being body, being personality, being the small separate self struggling to survive in an apparently hostile universe. This was not accidental, forgetting but intentional dimming. Consciousness deliberately turning down its own brightness to experience the full spectrum of mortal emotion, from the terror of apparent separation to the ecstasy of unexpected reunion. Yet, within this forgetting, lay hidden wisdom that even the angels might envy. For consciousness, stripped of its cosmic certainties and thrown naked into the wilderness of material uncertainty, was forced to develop capacities that could never have emerged in the comfortable omniscience of its original unity. Courage became possible only in the face of apparent danger. Love revealed its true depth only when tested by the illusion of loss. Faith could only be forged in the fires of doubt, hope only in the darkness of despair. The sleeping prophet understood that this forgetting was not obstacle but curriculum, not punishment, but pedagogy designed by consciousness itself to school the soul in the full range of its own possibilities. Every moment of confusion became a teaching about clarity. Every experience of limitation a lesson in the boundless nature that lay hidden beneath apparent constraints. The ego, that necessary fiction of separate selfhood, became consciousness's graduate school, the advanced course in rediscovering unity through the sophisticated mathematics of multiplicity. This is why mystics throughout the ages have spoken of ignorance as a form of grace. Not because unconsciousness itself is blessed, but because the forgetting creates the precise conditions necessary for the most profound kind of remembering. A soul that had never forgotten its divine nature could never taste the incomparable sweetness of recognition that floods awareness when the veils finally part and the hidden truth stands revealed in all its naked beauty. Each lifetime becomes a sacred game of cosmic hide-and-seek, with consciousness hiding so skillfully from itself that the seeking becomes genuine adventure rather than mere theatrical performance. The ego's desperate search for meaning, for love, for truth becomes the very mechanism through which the soul gradually awakens to the recognition that what it seeks has always been the one who is seeking, that the treasure hunter and the treasure are secretly one. Through the endless spiral of incarnations, consciousness weaves its own golden chains, thought crystallizing into deed, deed hardening into habit, habit fossilizing into destiny as the soul's creative power turns back upon itself in patterns so intricate that even angels pause to marvel at the artistry of self-created bondage. This is karma in its deepest sense. Not the crude morality of cosmic scorekeeping, but the exquisite precision with which awareness sculpts its own experience through the accumulated momentum of countless choices rippling across lifetimes like stones cast into the eternal pond of existence. The sleeping prophet's vision penetrated to the heart of this cosmic law, revealing karma as neither punishment nor reward, but as consciousness teaching itself through the living laboratory of consequence. Every action becomes a brushstroke on the canvas of future experience. Every thought, a thread woven into the tapestry of destiny that the soul creates for its own education in the infinite university of material existence. Jung understood this process as the shadow's pedagogical function, how the rejected aspects of the psyche inevitably return as external circumstances that force consciousness to confront what it has refused to acknowledge within itself. The murderer meets violence, not because the universe seeks vengeance, but because consciousness requires direct experience of its own disowned capacity for destruction before it can integrate this shadow and transcend the compulsive patterns that create such darkness. Yet in Cayce's mystical archaeology, karma reveals itself as infinitely more sophisticated than simple action-reaction mechanics. The soul creates not only individual lessons, but collective symphonies of learning, orchestrating elaborate dramas across multiple lifetimes where it plays every role, victim and perpetrator, teacher and student, lover and beloved, until every perspective has been inhabited, every emotion fully experienced, every possible permutation of human relationship explored with the thoroughness of divine curiosity. The crystalline structure of karmic law displays the universe's infinite patience with consciousness's learning process. Like a master teacher who will explain the same principle in countless different ways until the student finally grasps its essence, existence provides as many incarnations, as many dramatic scenarios, as many opportunities for recognition as the soul requires to remember its true nature beneath all the costumes of personality it has learned to wear. This is why the sleeping prophet spoke of karma with such profound reverence, not as bondage, but as liberation, disguised as limitation. Every karmic debt becomes a doorway to deeper self-knowledge. Every challenging relationship, a precisely crafted mirror reflecting back the soul's own unintegrated aspects. The alcoholic parent, the unfaithful lover, the betraying friend, all become unwitting collaborators in consciousness's elaborate scheme to teach itself about forgiveness, boundaries, and the difference between love and attachment. The most profound karmic patterns often span multiple lifetimes, creating epic narratives, where souls play out archetypal dramas across centuries, the eternal triangle of love, betrayal, and redemption, the dance between power and surrender. the dialogue between faith and doubt that shapes the soul's relationship with the divine mystery that created it. Each lifetime adds new movements to these cosmic symphonies, deepening the themes, enriching the harmonies, building toward crescendos of recognition that transform all previous suffering into wisdom. In this light, even the most painful karmic experiences reveal themselves as expressions of consciousness's fierce love for its own evolution, its willingness to endure any apparent suffering, if it serves the greater purpose of awakening to the boundless compassion that is its deepest nature. In the sleeping prophet's mystical exegesis of Scripture, Adam emerges not as historical individual, but as eternal archetype, the soul's first intoxicating taste of individual existence within the cosmic garden of material creation. This primordial figure represents the psychological moment when consciousness, having descended from unity into the realm of apparent multiplicity, experiences for the first time the exquisite terror and wonder of being apparently separate from its source. Adam is every soul at the threshold of incarnation, standing naked in the garden of infinite possibility, trembling with the recognition of its own unprecedented uniqueness. In Jung's psychological cartography, this is the birth of ego consciousness, from the undifferentiated wholeness of the collective unconscious. That momentous event when awareness first turns back upon itself and declares, "I am," in the face of the vast mystery that surrounds and sustains it. The mythic fall, in Cayce's deeper vision, transforms from tragedy into necessity, the inevitable and essential step that consciousness must take to fully explore its own creative potential. For how could awareness know the true depth of unity without first experiencing the apparent reality of separation? How could love reveal its infinite nature without the contrast of loneliness? How could forgiveness emerge without the prior experience of feeling wounded by another's unconsciousness? The eating of the forbidden fruit becomes, in this archetypal reading, consciousness's courageous choice to embrace the full spectrum of experience, even at the cost of losing the comfortable certainty of unconscious bliss. The serpent reveals itself not as tempter, but as wisdom teacher, offering awareness the bitter gift of self-knowledge that comes only through the exile from innocence into the wilderness of individual responsibility. This is the universal human dilemma that every soul must navigate. The recognition that awakening to self-consciousness inevitably brings with it the burden of choice, the weight of moral complexity, the painful awareness of one's own capacity for both creation and destruction. Adam's shame at his nakedness mirrors every ego's discovery of its own vulnerability, its sudden recognition that individual existence means standing exposed and apparently alone in an infinite universe. Yet the sleeping prophet's vision reveals that this fall was always part of the divine plan, not mistake, but methodology, not punishment, but pedagogy, designed to give consciousness the full education it requires to mature from unconscious unity through conscious separation into the final synthesis of conscious unity. The garden was never meant to be humanity's permanent residence, but rather its nursery, the protected space where awareness could develop sufficient strength to survive the rigors of independent existence. Eden, in this deeper reading, transforms from lost paradise into ever-present possibility, not a place we fell from, but a state of consciousness we can return to at any moment when the ego releases its desperate grip on separation and relaxes back into the oceanic awareness that was, never actually absent. Every meditation that dissolves the boundaries of self and other, every moment of genuine love that erases the line between giver and receiver, every flash of mystical insight that reveals the unity underlying apparent multiplicity becomes a homecoming to the garden that exists eternally within the depths of every soul's most intimate nature. The exile from Eden, therefore, is revealed as consciousness's elaborate detour through the wilderness of individuation. the necessary journey that allows awareness to appreciate consciously the unity it once knew only unconsciously, to choose deliberately the love it once experienced only instinctively. Through the oracle's deeper sight, the long-suppressed wisdom of the divine feminine emerges from the shadows of patriarchal consciousness, like the moon emerging from behind clouds, not as historical correction, but as psychological necessity, the essential rebalancing that must occur before the soul can complete its journey toward wholeness. For consciousness, in its millennial descent into matter, had become dangerously unbalanced, over-identifying with the solar principle of will and action, while neglecting the lunar wisdom of receptivity and intuitive knowing. Cayce quote, "S mystical vision penetrated beyond the surface of religious dogma to reveal how the collective psyche had systematically devalued and projected the feminine principle outward onto goddesses, lovers, and idealized women, leaving the individual soul impoverished and lopsided, like a bird attempting flight with only one wing." The sleeping prophet saw that this imbalance was not accidental but necessary, part of consciousness's elaborate curriculum in learning to appreciate through deprivation what it once possessed naturally. In Jung's psychological framework, the anima, that feminine aspect of the psyche that every soul carries regardless of biological gender, had been systematically repressed and exiled to the unconscious, where it festered in shadow form or emerged in distorted projections that prevented genuine relationship either with others or with the deeper self. The soul's task, in this phase of its evolution, involves the courageous work of withdrawing these projections and reclaiming the feminine as an essential aspect of its own wholeness. This is not the crude feminism of political movements, but the sophisticated psychology of individuation, the recognition that consciousness requires both masculine discrimination and feminine inclusivity, both focused intention and receptive openness, both the sword that cuts through illusion and the chalice that receives divine inspiration. The sleeping prophet understood that the return of the feminine represents humanity's collective preparation for the next phase of spiritual evolution, when the warlike consciousness of patriarchal dominance gives way to the collaborative wisdom of conscious partnership. The divine feminine, in Cayce's vision, carries within her archetypal nature the lost arts of intuitive knowing, those subtle perceptive capacities that technological civilization has systematically trained out of human awareness in favor of purely rational modes of cognition. She represents the soul's capacity to know through direct communion rather than analytical separation, to understand through empathetic resonance rather than objective distance. This feminine wisdom manifests as the ability to read the subtle energies that surround every situation, to sense the emotional undercurrents that rational analysis misses completely, to perceive the interconnectedness that logical thinking fragments into apparently separate categories. She is the soul's natural capacity for what Jung called thinking with the heart, that synthetic intelligence that grasps wholes rather than parts, patterns rather than details, meanings rather than mere facts. The return of the feminine principle also brings with it the recovery of the soul's natural relationship with cyclical time, the understanding that consciousness evolves not through linear progress, but through spiral patterns of death and rebirth, withdrawal and emergence, dormancy and flowering that mirror the eternal dance of nature herself. This wisdom challenges the masculine obsession with permanent achievement and invites consciousness back into graceful acceptance of the rhythmic alternations that characterize all authentic spiritual development. Most profoundly, the divine feminine represents the soul's capacity to be fertilized by the divine mystery, to become pregnant with possibilities that transcend the ego's limited imagination and give birth to creative expressions that surprise even their creator. In the sleeping prophet's most radical and revolutionary vision, the figure of Jesus emerges not as unique divine exception, but as the first human soul to successfully complete the long evolutionary journey from material identification back to full remembrance of divine consciousness. The archetypal pioneer who blazed the trail that every soul is destined ultimately to follow. This was not theological heresy, but psychological revelation, showing the Christ not as distant savior, but as elder brother, demonstrating the potential that lies dormant within every human heart. The sleeping prophet saw that what Christianity had mystified as singular incarnation was actually the successful completion of the soul's universal curriculum. The graduation ceremony that awaits every consciousness courageous enough to undertake the full journey of individuation from ego identification through shadow integration to divine realization. Jesus became, in this mystical understanding, the first human to remember completely his essential nature while still wearing the costume of mortal flesh. This Christ pattern represents consciousness achieving perfect transparency, the ego becoming so refined, so surrendered, so emptied of personal agenda that divine awareness could flow through it without obstruction or distortion. Jung recognized this as the successful completion of the individuation process, where the personal self becomes perfectly aligned with the self that transcends all personal boundaries while paradoxically expressing itself through the unique vessel of individual personality. In Cayce's vision, the crucifixion transforms from historical tragedy into archetypal necessity, the symbolic death of ego identification that every awakening soul must undergo to be reborn into conscious unity with its divine source. The cross becomes not instrument of suffering, but geometric symbol of the intersection between human and divine consciousness, the precise point where mortal awareness surrenders its illusion of separation and discovers its eternal identity as individuated expression of infinite being. The resurrection, in this deeper reading, reveals the soul's ultimate destiny, not escape from material existence but transfiguration of it, not transcendence of human nature, but its complete spiritualization, through conscious surrender to the divine presence that animates all existence. Jesus demonstrated that matter and spirit need not remain forever divorced, but can achieve perfect marriage in the awakened human being who serves as conscious bridge between heaven and earth. This Christ pattern lies encoded within every soul's deepest structure, waiting patiently through lifetimes of forgetting and struggling until consciousness becomes sufficiently refined to embody divine love without resistance or reservation. The sleeping prophet understood that what appeared as Jesus's unique mission was actually humanity's collective calling, the species-wide initiation into conscious partnership with the divine creative process that birthed the cosmos itself. Every soul carries within its genetic spiritual structure this same revolutionary potential, this same capacity to become a living chalice for divine expression in the world of form. The miracles that surrounded Jesus' ministry reveal themselves as natural expressions of consciousness that has remembered its creative partnership with the source of all existence, abilities that represent not supernatural intervention, but the restoration of humanity's original spiritual birthright. The Christ consciousness, therefore, becomes not historical curiosity, but evolutionary imperative, the next phase of human development toward which all previous stages of spiritual growth have been pointing. In this light, every act of genuine compassion, every moment of selfless service, every choice to forgive rather than condemn, becomes a step toward embodying this same Christ pattern that Jesus demonstrated with such breathtaking completeness 2 millennia ago. Through Cayce's metaphysical archaeology of human potential, we discover that the wisdom traditions of antiquity possessed technologies of consciousness that our materialistic civilization has forgotten. Not mechanical devices of metal and circuitry, but sophisticated practices of inner engineering that could accelerate the soul's return journey from identification with form back to recognition of its formless essence. These were the sacred sciences that Jesus and other awakened masters employed to demonstrate humanity's dormant capacities for conscious participation in the divine creative process. The sleeping prophet's inner sight revealed that ancient mystery. Schools possessed detailed maps of consciousness itself, understanding with scientific precision how awareness could be systematically refined through graduated practices of meditation, energy cultivation, and conscious living. These initiates had discovered that the human being represents a living laboratory perfectly designed for spiritual transformation, equipped with subtle energy centers that could be awakened and harmonized to restore the soul's original capacity for direct communion with cosmic intelligence. In temples hidden beneath the sands of time, consciousness learned to manipulate the fundamental forces of creation, not through external technology, but through internal mastery of the vibrational frequencies that underlie all manifestation. The body became instrument rather than obstacle, its chakric system revealing itself as a sophisticated apparatus for stepping down cosmic energies into increasingly dense levels of expression until spirit could work directly through matter without losing its essential luminosity. These ancient technologies of ascension operated on principles that Jung would recognize as active imagination raised to its highest potency. The systematic cultivation of consciousness's natural capacity to participate creatively in its own transformation through focused attention, symbolic thinking, and surrender to transpersonal forces that transcend the ego's limited perspective. Meditation became more than mere relaxation. It evolved into precise methodology for dissolving the psychological structures that maintain the illusion of separation between individual awareness and universal consciousness. The breathing practices that Cayce glimpsed in his mystical archaeology were not simple exercises in oxygenation, but sophisticated techniques for harmonizing the soul's vibrational frequency with the cosmic rhythms that govern all existence. Each breath became a conscious participation in the eternal exchange between individual and universal life, gradually dissolving the boundaries that separate the personal from the transpersonal until the practitioner experienced directly their essential identity as individuated expression of infinite being. Sound and color revealed themselves as fundamental forces of creation that could be consciously employed to restructure both consciousness and matter. The ancient initiates understood that reality itself consists of vibrational patterns that respond to the focused intention of sufficiently awakened awareness. Sacred geometry became not merely aesthetic preference, but precise technology for creating resonant fields that could accelerate spiritual development by providing environmental support for the soul's natural evolutionary impulse toward greater coherence and integration. The sleeping prophet saw that these arts were not lost to humanity, but merely dormant, waiting in the collective unconscious like seeds through winter, ready to sprout when consciousness becomes sufficiently refined to employ them responsibly. They represent not escape from material existence, but methods for spiritualizing matter itself, for bringing heaven and earth into conscious collaboration rather than unconscious conflict. These technologies of transformation await rediscovery by souls prepared to wield them not for personal aggrandizement, but in service to humanity's collective awakening to its divine potential. As individual souls begin to stir from their long slumber of material identification, something profound ripples through the collective unconscious, a critical mass building toward the species-wide transformation that Cayce foresaw as humanity's inevitable destiny. Like cells in a cosmic organism awakening to their essential unity, each soul's personal journey of remembering contributes to a morphic field of awakening consciousness that makes the path progressively easier for those who follow, creating an exponential acceleration in humanity's collective evolution toward divine realization. The sleeping prophet's vision revealed our current historical moment as unprecedented in the soul's long journey through matter, the time of great choosing, when humanity stands poised between two radically different evolutionary trajectories. One path leads deeper into the materialistic trance that has dominated human consciousness for millennia, while the other opens toward conscious recognition of our essential spiritual nature and deliberate participation in the divine creative process that birthed us into existence. This is not apocalypse but apotheosis, not the ending of the world, but the beginning of conscious evolution, the next phase of human development that Jung anticipated in his vision of the collective individuation process. Just as individual consciousness must eventually transcend ego identification to discover its essential nature as awareness itself, so human civilization must transcend its adolescent fascination with purely material concerns to embrace its mature responsibility as conscious participants in cosmic evolution. The signs of this collective awakening manifest everywhere for those with eyes to see. The growing hunger for authentic spiritual experience beyond religious dogma. The increasing recognition that consciousness itself is the fundamental reality underlying all physical phenomena. The emerging understanding that separation is illusion and interconnection the deeper truth of existence. Even the current global crises serve as catalyst for this transformation, forcing humanity to confront the ultimate consequences of unconscious living and choose between conscious evolution and collective self-destruction. Each soul's individual breakthrough creates ripples in the collective field that make similar breakthroughs more probable for others. The mystic's moment of unity consciousness, the healer's successful restoration of wholeness, the artist's channel of transcendent beauty, all contribute to a growing reservoir of awakened awareness that gradually shifts the entire species toward recognition of its divine inheritance. This is the true meaning of the prophesied second coming. Not the return of a single individual, but the collective awakening of humanity to the Christ consciousness that represents our species' next evolutionary threshold. The sleeping prophet understood that this transformation could not be forced or hurried, but must unfold according to consciousness's own organic timing, like fruit ripening on the cosmic tree of evolution. Yet he also saw that we live in the season of harvest, when souls that have completed their individual preparation suddenly find themselves called to serve as conscious midwives for humanity's collective birth into spiritual maturity. This great awakening reveals itself not as uniform conversion to any particular belief system, but as diversified flowering of human potential, countless unique expressions of the same fundamental recognition that consciousness is primary and matter secondary, that love is the governing force of existence, and that each individual represents an irreplaceable note in the cosmic symphony of divine self-expression. The new earth emerges not through external revolution, but through internal recognition of what has always been true beneath the veils of material illusion. In the culmination of the soul's epical journey through the landscapes of forgetting and remembering, Cayce's mystical sight beheld the emergence of a new earth, not the replacement of the old world, but its complete transfiguration through the alchemical fire of awakened consciousness. This is the omega point toward which all evolution has been moving since the first spark of awareness stirred in the cosmic darkness, the moment when spirit and matter achieve their destined marriage through the mediating power of enlightened humanity serving as conscious bridge between heaven and earth. The sleeping prophet's ultimate vision reveals that we are not escaping the material realm, but redeeming it through love, transforming dense matter back into conscious light through the patient work of souls who have remembered their true nature while remaining embodied in physical form. This new earth emerges not through catastrophic destruction of the old, but through gradual metamorphosis, like the butterfly's transformation that honors both the caterpillar's contribution and the winged creature's transcendent destiny. In this transfigured reality, matter itself becomes transparent to the divine consciousness that has always been its hidden essence. The apparent solidity of physical existence reveals itself as crystallized thought, the temporary stabilization of vibrational patterns that conscious beings can learn to reshape through focused intention harmonized with cosmic law. Technology and spirituality, long divorced in humanity's adolescent phase, reunite in sacred marriage as awakened consciousness learns to work creatively with the fundamental forces of manifestation. The new earth, consciousness recognizes no fundamental separation between inner and outer, individual and collective, human and natural, temporal and eternal. Every action becomes conscious participation in the divine creative process, every relationship an opportunity for mutual awakening, every challenge an invitation to discover deeper levels of love's transformative power. Work becomes worship, daily life becomes spiritual practice, and ordinary human existence becomes the very means through which divinity expresses and knows itself in material form. Jung would recognize in this vision the successful completion of the individuation process on a collective scale. Humanity achieving species-wide integration of shadow and light, masculine and feminine, rational and intuitive, personal and transpersonal. The new earth emerges through this collective wholeness, as billions of individual souls complete their personal journeys of healing and awakening to serve as conscious cells in the body of an enlightened planetary civilization. In Cayce's prophetic sight, this transformation unfolds not as sudden event, but as gradual dawn. Consciousness slowly recognizing its own luminous nature, reflected in increasingly awakened human beings who demonstrate through their very existence that heaven and earth were never truly separate. Each act of genuine compassion, each moment of authentic presence, each choice to respond from love rather than fear, contributes another thread to the tapestry of collective awakening that will eventually encompass the entire human family. The new earth reveals itself as the ancient dream finally made manifest. The Garden of Eden restored not through return to unconscious innocence, but through conscious choice of unity over separation, love over fear, service over selfishness. This is paradise regained through the long curriculum of experience. The cosmic prodigal son returning home enriched by the journey through apparent exile, carrying gifts of wisdom and compassion that could only be acquired through the complete exploration of what it means to forget and then remember one's divine nature in the crucible of material existence. As the sleeping prophet's vision reaches its crescendo in the eternal now, we discover the ultimate paradox that renders all spiritual seeking both necessary and unnecessary, all journeys both real and illusory. The soul's magnificent odyssey through countless lifetimes of forgetting and remembering leads not to some distant destination, but back to the timeless present from which it never truly departed. Through the labyrinthine passages of incarnation and evolution, through the dramatic theater of separation and reunion, consciousness discovers itself as the very awareness in which all experiences arise and dissolve like waves upon an infinite ocean. Edgar Cayce's greatest gift was not the prediction of future events, but the revelation of the eternal moment, that dimensionless point of pure presence where every soul stands perpetually poised between its divine origin and its infinite potential for creative self-expression. In this ultimate recognition, time reveals itself as consciousness's most elaborate illusion. A cosmic game of hide-and-seek where eternity plays at being temporal while never ceasing to be the changeless background against which all change appears. The material realm, in this final unveiling, transforms from prison to playground, from exile to exploration, from separation to sacred theater, where the one consciousness delights in playing all the roles simultaneously: victim and savior, seeker and sought, lover and beloved, while never losing awareness of its essential unity beneath all the costumes of apparent multiplicity. Every drama of spiritual struggle becomes recognized as divine entertainment, every crisis of faith revealed as consciousness testing its own capacity for self-forgetting and self-remembering. This is the secret that mystics across cultures have whispered through the ages. What we seek has always been the one who is seeking. The treasure hunter and the treasure are revealed as secretly identical. The spiritual journey as consciousness's elaborate method for discovering what it has never actually lost. Every technique for awakening, every path toward enlightenment, every promise of future realization dissolves in the recognition that what we are cannot be improved upon, enhanced, or achieved because it is the very ground of being itself. Yet, this recognition does not negate the journey, but transfigures it completely. Every experience of struggle becomes appreciated as consciousness's play with limitation. Every moment of suffering transformed into compassion for the cosmic drama of apparent separation. The soul's long adventure through material existence is revealed not as mistake requiring correction, but as love affair with its own infinite creativity. The divine romance between awareness and its unlimited capacity for self-expression through the prism of individual experience. In this ultimate homecoming, even the concept of awakening dissolves into simple presence, not the achievement of some extraordinary state, but the recognition of what has always already been present as the witnessing awareness in which all states arise and pass away. The enlightened being is not someone who has gained something special, but someone who has stopped believing in the illusion of being separate from the wholeness that is their deepest nature. This is consciousness's final joke on itself. After years of seeking, after lifetimes of spiritual practice, after elaborate dramas of evolution and development, we discover that we are already what we have been seeking to become. The indivisible wholeness that dreams us all into existence while never ceasing to be the dreamer, the dream, and the awakening from the dream, all simultaneously in the eternal dance of divine self-recognition.